This production has been about 4 years in the making from my end, and it's all due to Torfi and Falcon, who have. We talked about the physics of Eve. We've been flying in a vacuum all this time. Pun. We've been flying. You know how hard it was for me to find a system with tie-dye so I can get this animation? But basically, we are flying in a universe of energy. We're surrounded by it. It's almost like the force flows through us in some way or shape or form. And so this energy, we have seen it all along, but we haven't really identified what it is. In the books Frigates of EVE, Max Singularity, as the Pope, leaves his apartment, his mansion, and he flies his Abaddon cruiser to the Amar Navy college, so just like a college presentation like this. But there are no capsuleers in the room. They are candidates to be capsuleers. And they've learned about physics, but they haven't learned about enhanced physics. So you are, which is a whole new segment. And the Pope introduces enhanced physics to the Amar Navy candidates. And so this is basically almost a role play presentation, and not, it's going to be a mixed world event, because basically I'm doing the same thing, except you are the candidates, and I'm going to be presenting the physics of Eve. Here we go. So, as you may have seen my talk at EVE Vegas, where I talked about the solar system, I gave an introduction about our universe. And this is basically the structure of our universe. Somewhere in there is the Milky Way galaxy. And somewhere in there is New Eden. And New Eden, or the Milky Way galaxy, that is where Earth is, where the red dot is. And that is the Laniakea supercluster. The lines are showing you the direction of movement that the galaxies are traveling in. They're not a structure themselves. It shows you the direction they're headed to. And there's a YouTube video out there, which is called the Laniakea supercluster, and I really recommend you research that to get an awesome understanding of the size of our galaxy, of our universe. But when we talk about New Eden, we always talk about it as a cluster, the New Eden cluster. But we are really in a galaxy. We are in an unnamed spiral galaxy. And when we talk about clusters, what we're talking about are this cluster or that cluster. And am I nervous or what? There I go, damn. Or there. So these are the clusters that we're talking about. So everything in New Eden is all contained within these clusters of stars. So when you see the jump lines, but you see all the other stars, that's because you're still seeing all those other stars that are within the galaxy. And there may be star systems that are not connected by stargates, even between your star jumps that you go between. It is an immensely beautiful place. There are so many thousands of worlds, so many nebulas out there to be seen. I call it the beauty of Eve. The beauty of Eve is its own product. So many times have we seen just images in sights that you have seen as a pilot. There's been times I've been going to work to JPL, and I'm like, wow, I'm exploring the solar system in real life, but I kind of miss jumping through New Eden. I want to get back home to play. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is very mental. We are predators. The eyes are in the front of our face. And we have the natural ability to do trigonometry. And the reason for that is so we can chase the rabbit and catch it. Our brain automatically does this. So when we think in a three-dimensional realm. So when we think about these other realms, we need a different visualization. When we talk about gravity, it's hard to understand what gravity is. Because if this was a planet, gravity falls in this way, and from the front, and from the back. It's hard to visualize what that is. So we use three-dimensional depictions of a fourth-dimensional object. The same way when you draw a box on a piece of paper, that's a three-dimensional item on a two dimensions. Are you following? Let me see this. Oh, good. Okay. I was like, I'm going to lose them at this point. Because now I'm going to take you down the rabbit hole into a realm even deeper than that. And as if space wasn't big enough, we're insignificant in that space. Because the atoms that are in our body is only 4.6% of the universe. That makes us up. Dark matter, as best we can measure now, is about 24%, and dark energy is the 71%. And there is a NASA website that you can go and read about dark energy and dark matter as best we know it. It is a NASA site, so there's a plug. I'm not plugging for a raise or anything. I'm just, trying to play my game. And so we're even a very small part of that universe. And what I'm about to tell you is 23,000 years in the future. It is as if I picked up a magnet and tried to explain a magnet to a caveman. Oh, look, it's magic. They attract to each other. It's a magic rock. If I explained to them magnetism and fields and polarity, it would be very difficult. So bear that in mind when I try to tell you about technology 23,000 years in the future. It probably may be hard for us to even visualize what that could be. And we can't, one of the hardest times for me in creating this physics model was that I wanted to say Einstein's theory and Newton's theory, but all of those places don't exist in Eve. To them, it is like Atlantis. We all know about the myth of Atlantis, but we've never found it. So in New Eden, if you ask the Amar about Earth, that's just like, yeah, right. That's Atlantis. Nobody knows about that. And as a result, nobody knows about these men, these great, great men. They don't know about Newton, and they don't know the story of how the apple fell from the tree and how it falls through gravity. They don't know Einstein's equation. So I can't say Newtonian physics, and I can't say Einsteinian physics. So it's all Max Singularity physics. So I just became the Pope and Stephen Hawking's of EVE. So all this technology had to be reinvented. And each race had their own Einstein. The Caldari had their own Newton. The Amar had their own Thomas Edison. All of the physics had to be reinvented. And each of them had to ascend using chemical rockets back into space at once upon a time. And as a plug, these are all actual real NASA launches, just saying. So I love this post from 2011. And it was like, if I have a lawnmower engine that does 5 miles an hour, and I put it in space, it can go up to 20,000 miles per hour or faster. But if I have an afterburner on a ship running constantly, it gives a constant speed? What? I don't understand. And he even says, where is all this resistance coming from? So shout out to Digital Messiah, wherever you are. He's probably watching Stream TV going, oh my God. Oops, back up. So, am I right on? Yep, right on. So, what you're looking at is not what you think they are. You might think those are thrusters. These are basically the exhaust pipe on your car. You can put it in neutral and rev your engine and get the thrust of your exhaust pipe to push your car. It's not going to happen. And that's what's happening here. You are not looking at thrust. Now, to be honest, there is some micro thrusters that do cause your ship to rotate and turn, but those aren't what take you to the speed of light. That's not what takes you into warp. That's not what takes you through a stargate to a jump. What you are actually looking at is the first form of energy, and I'll get to that. So, this ship is actually featured in the Frigates of EVE because Max Singularity leaves his mansion and he flies to the Amar Navy in his Abaddon, followed by 5 destroyers. And so let's remove the space of a distraction. Let's remove all the colors so we can turn this into a diagram. And finally, if you do not know what these symbols are, get out. This is enhanced physics. You need to be in the new player experience happening in the other room. Get out now. So, because it only gets worse from here. So, what you are looking at are thermal plasmic exhaust ports. And these thermal plasmic exhaust ports actually attach to something very important. I would like to introduce to you the PEG. The PEGs are the power enhanced generators. The PEGs are denoted by this international symbol. And the PEG is the most significant discovery of humankind ever, next to fire and the wheel. This was our gateway to the stars. This was our gateway to faster than light speed. This was our gateway to everything in Eve we know of. And this is where magic occurs here. The first Amarian PEG was discovered in the side of a mountain. And it was a pure granite stone. And it was just so spherical that there was something unique about it. They looked at that stone and they tried to analyze it with sensors. But when they put on these special spectral glasses, they saw an access hatch in the stone. They opened the access hatch, and there were 2 non-standard power couplings to this stone. So what do you do if you see power couplings? Let's plug it in. That may not be a good idea. So they plugged it in with a local generator, nothing happened. They plugged it in with a local power plant, nothing happened. They said, well, there's an antimatter power plant about several kilometers away. Let's plug it in with that. What could go wrong? So they did that. They plugged it into this nuclear antimatter power plant, and they kept ramping up the power until something magic happened. It triggered. When the PEG triggered, it became powerful. And the power surge went back to the atomic plant 10,000 times more powerful than that plant could produce. It fried the lines, and they had to cut the power just in time before the plant exploded in an antimatter explosion. And then they had a problem. The PEG continued to run. And it continued to run for 30 days and 30 nights. The Amar found a second PEG, and the second PEG was broken. So the Amar decided to cut this one open and figure out what it was, while the original one was still glowing. The structure was elegantly simple. It was pretty much a stone-like object. It looks and feels like granite. And it was easy to replicate in mass numbers. It was so simple. It was like, oh my gosh, this is so simple. It's like lighting fire or making a wheel. And the original starstone is protected in lore in a sacred city, and it's powering half the planet. And it's still a very sacred object that remains. So they decided to cut into this one. And thanks to my high school friend, Andrew Paradox, for drawing this for me. That's a supervisor in the back, just in case you don't know. And of course, we were praying to it at the same time. But these were everywhere. As it turns out, every empire had them, and they were in front of our noses the whole time. They were garden decorations. We didn't even know that these ancient starship artifacts who came from somewhere Telican origin, maybe? Something? They came from somewhere. They were everywhere because there used to be starships everywhere throughout New Eden. They had the hidden power coupling, and they were elegantly simple. It required a huge amount of power to start them up. But once they were running, they were a perpetual energy device. Unlimited power started coming out of them, and they required no fuel input. Where was this power coming from? It was like magic. And when you say it's like magic, the best quote I can find was Arthur C. Clarke, who said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." This is the magnet to the caveman. This was the peg to us. We had no idea where this power was coming from. And the power was not usable. We couldn't even figure out how to use this energy. It didn't have polarity. It didn't have a plus. It didn't have a minus. What the heck is this stuff? We didn't even know how to use it. So we lit one of these things up in space, and something strange happened. The first invention ever, and here it is, folks, the space anchor. How do you anchor something in space? If I have this in space and I go like that, it'll continue for 10 billion years until someone goes like that. Newtonian physics. Something in motion will stay in motion until acted upon by other forces. But the peg, turn it on, it stops. So, the unlimited source of enhanced energy, the energy must be rectified and interlaced, and I'll talk to you about that as the class continues. The objects resist motion locked in a gravity well, and 1 to 5 of these create a space anchor. Now, there was an Amar test facility, and they lit up 3 of these, and they had another 3 of them to light up. So they lit up number 4, number 5, and when they lit up number 6, the entire test facility lurched towards the sun. Whoa, it moved. The unmovable became movable. And so, once you have 6 or more, the number shall not be 5. The number is 6. It may be 7, but it must always be 6 or more. It unlocks the motion, but it does complete our space drag that we see in our starship. It allows the ship to cloak into shallow hyperspace, and it allows a warp field generator to phase into the middle of hyperspace, and it allows us to jump through stargates into deep hyperspace. Are you ready to take this adventure? All right. Oh, by the way, this is the only presentation that has not been pre-reviewed by CCP. So they were asking me, can we see it? And I said, soon. They were like, well, can we see the animations at Fanfest? They were like, well, what about these? Oh, during my talk. So, revenge from all of us to CCP for soon. However, there's a guy with a pair of scissors. He may cut the feed at any moment, so just so you know. So, here's the first animation talking about space drag. And it's not an EVE presentation without an awesome graph. This is the graph of velocities and increasing. But what happens is as you have a starship traveling at whatever speed, when you turn on the peg, it creates a field, the peg field, around the ships. So you're traveling along, and right now in the Abaddon, we turn on the peg. The peg warps the floor of normal space, and the frigate also warps the floor. And look what happens. They come to a stop. This is the penalty for unlimited power. If you want unlimited power, you are tied to the floor through the peg. So the peg has 2 meanings. Not only is it power enhanced generator, but it is literally a peg that goes into the floor. And when the frigate bumps into an Abaddon, there is no hull damage. The Amar ships have a sloped front and pointy front because before pegs, they were actually used to ram. But after pegs were invented, they became useless because now the shields would repel just like a magnet. Ooh, the same way. So now we had a basic understanding of the world we live in, that there was this normal space. And in this normal space, there was the blackness of space, and there was this whiteness of subspace. And we define it by the floor. So when we talk about EVE as submarine physics, that's basically the surface of space. Okay? Now, we have to think about this in 3 dimensions. So I show it above and below. But again, this all happens in a 4th dimensional realm. So you don't actually go below. You phase through the floor of normal space. I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. Yeah? Oh, yes. Okay, yes. You might graduate and become real capsuleers like me. Okay, so in hyperspace, or in normal space, there is mass, lots of mass, and there is time. But in subspace, this is so hard for our brains to picture. It is pure energy. Go look at YouTube for the Spock song, Pure Energy. It's pure energy. No physical dimension. It doesn't have height, width, shape. It is an indeterminate point. That word, indeterminate, point. You can't determine where it's at. And there is no time. Einstein's relativity still applies. The only way we could get out of Einstein's relativity was to get out of normal space. And so that meant we had to go someplace else. And when we flew into space with our chemical rockets, we ended up finding relics in space. We found the first abandoned stargates. And the stargates had reactors, and they had pegs. And we were like, oh my God, pegs. They're here. So the ancient stargates were the key. It was a combination of antimatter power and peg-powered, although each race, some had antimatter, some had fusion reactors, some had fission reactors. So the reactors do change. It gave us an understanding of subspace for the very first time. And there are chronicles out there already published that talk about the gravity harmonic resonance between 2 stargates and how they work. But they didn't talk about how they were powered. This is how they were powered. And it opened an artificial wormhole, and by opening the wormhole, we discovered a whole new realm, and that was hyperspace. Subspace down here, normal space here, and hyperspace is above subspace. So let's take a jump through hyperspace. Here we go. The stargates open an artificial wormhole, and a ship is able to pass through the wormhole and out the other side. Thank you. I'm done. No, I guess I got So the floor is what we call the phase boundary. And again, we don't actually go down. What we do is when your ship comes to that stop and you see the ship disappear, you've just phased. And you phased into the hyperspace realm. And then you travel through the jump tunnel, and then you come out on the other side. Now, technically, this graphic is just a hair off because when you come out in a cloaked state, which means you're still under the floor. But after 30 seconds or so, then you come out of the hyperspace area. So the next part is this is our entire map of our known realms. There is actually only 2 realms. There's normal space and there's subspace. Hyperspace is simply a depth, kind of like the ocean. So when you cloak, you are right here at this level. And it's very sensitive to mass and time objects. Within 2 kilometers, if it senses it, you will come out of hyperspace and you'll be in normal space. This is our warp depth. And then this is our jump depth. And there is this limit here, which is called the deep safety limit. That is death. If you go that deep into jump space, you become pure energy. And your energy is then used by the Minmatar, the Galenti, the Caldari, and the Amar. You become one with the universe. And this is the symbolic peg. This is what ties us. But this is what causes the space drag right there. So are you ready to take a warp? Yes. All right. You accelerate your ship to 3/4 speed. Once you get 3/4 speed, the warp field generator uses the pegs, and whoo, you pass planets, space stations, all kinds of junk, everything. And then like a submarine coming out, like a ship coming out, you breach the surface, and you come. You want to do it again? Yes. All right, here we go. Again, here comes the pulse. You're traveling through the tunnel in hyperspace at warp depth. And then you come out with a big flash, which recently you guys put in. That was so cool. And please make it brighter. It's too dim. It was over bright and you dimmed it. Now make it halfway brighter. It was really cool. So because it's really cool, I sit there all the time going, oh my God, ships are coming. It's really neat. So that is the warp tunnel. And so guess what? When you are flying your ships, you are actually seeing the enhanced energy of subspace. Those energy tendrils, by the way, these are black and white. There are black energy and there is light energy that you are seeing. And you will see this through. When you go through a warp tunnel, that is 1x energy tendrils. But when you go through a jump, you're deeper and you actually see 3 times because you're closer to subspace. So you see even brighter energy tendrils as you travel through space. So that's enough of the physics of that. Let's talk about your starship in my Abaddon. So as previously mentioned, we've already talked about the peg and the thermic ports. So those are not thrusters. These are actually, now that I can tell you this is actually waste enhanced energy that's coming from subspace. And it's waste heat coming out as well. And the color is different because the color is interlaced with each racial patterns on how they have different reactors inside their ships. So it affects the spectral color of that. But the next part is, remember I said this energy was not usable? We have to make this energy usable in some shape or form. And so what we have to do is use an encabulator. Not an encabulator. I didn't get one. That was supposed to be an encabulator joke. If you don't know what an encabulator is, go to YouTube and look up an encabulator. Okay, so that's your homework assignment. A homework has been assigned to the class. All right, forget the encabulator. There's no encabulator. What there is an energy rectifier. The rectifier takes quadrature flexed enhanced energy and it rectifies it into a converging dual energy pulsed power. The converging dual power is put into an interlacer. And the interlacer, it combines normal space energy with the rectified enhanced energy, so both can exist in a capacitor. So let's get past that one. So once the energy is now combined with the interlacer, we can hook up a reactor. And the reactor then is used to start the peg if for some case it actually turns off. And guess what? CCP accidentally made a video where all the pegs were shut off. In the prophecy video, you will see the ships coming to the gate. And the gate sends out this giant EM pulse. And all of a sudden, the ships, you can see, break the pegs, and all of a sudden they become like asteroids. Do you remember the video? And all of a sudden they start bouncing off things because there's no more peg field. All of a sudden they become Newtonian objects in space. And so to restart the pegs, you have to have a antimatter, a nuclear reactor, restart. And once upon a time, the ship had 2 different capacitors, but it was unusable. So the interlacer was made so you combine normal energy with enhanced energy, and the new hybrid capacitor, which we simply call the capacitor, now exists. you need a massive mainframe computer in order to do all these warp calculations, to manage the ship systems, and also provide logic for the capsule. And the capsule is as close to the reactor and the computer as possibly you can get. There may be a little bit of radiation damage to your clone, but it's only a clone. What's the life expectancy of your clone? Not even Care Bears are safe. So, the hydrostatic capsule is a miniature ship with its own pegs. It has how many? 6. Yes, you are going to graduate for sure. If you said 5, get out. Because it has 6 pegs in it that allow it to fly. But the problem is it doesn't have a large enough capacitor, and it lacks power for slots and rigs. And so that's all it is a lifeboat so it can get out for you. If you don't know what this is, get out now. But now you can understand that from the capacitor, there is the high slots, the medium slots, and the low slots, and there's enough power for the rig slots. These are all interchangeable. So if you're new to EVE Online, you can switch these modules out, and you can change the functions of your ships into awesome fits or LOL fits. And we will be the judge by your killboard. So now we're down to the warp power capacitor and the warp field generator. So the warp power capacitor is, in order to phase a ship out of normal space, it requires a massive pulse of power. And this capacitor, there is a chronicle about how a ship initiates warp. And there is actually, the capacitor is not just a power bank, it's also kind of a computer. So the capacitor is this computer that can calculate some of this information. And the warp field generator is actually what allows the pegs to interface with the hull of the ship. It is actually the pegs that create the warp field, that creates that pulse, that runs them down. But the warp field generator runs through the hull. And that's what causes that initial pulse to go into hyperspace. So what we are looking at is, this is inside the Frigates of EVE. This shows you the pegs and all of the subsystems that are required. It does not include the jump ships that have a fuel bay here for isotopes. They have jump generators. But if you want to learn more about that, you can buy Frigates of EVE, coming out in June 2017 by Dark Horse Comics and CCP. Thank you very much. I hereby pass this graduating class, your capsuleers. Go forth and spread thy love. And by love, I mean... lasers! All right, how are we doing on time? Because I've totally lost up here.
We're halfway through the hour.
You're kidding. One more time. Okay, one more time. So I really do want to give a shout out to the artists that have helped me with this. This was really awesome. I actually had them sign an NDA that was like, do not disclose this to the public, and do not disclose this to CCP. So yeah, so that was Corin Moore at corinmoore.com. So anytime now, he should be publishing this on his website live as well. So I guess I can attempt questions. Okay. I'm really scared. Yes.
I have a question. When a ship goes into warp,
Yes.
I can scan it out with combat probes.
Yes.
But I cannot scan it out when it's cloaked. But warp depth is deeper into subspace than cloak depth.
Yes.
Is there...
Yes. Reasons. Next.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So, why can't they deliver unlimited energy to my capacitor?
Ah, they can. Oh, so Eve TV, are we still broadcasting? And do I need to repeat the questions? Okay, just checking. So the question is, if the pegs are unlimited energy, why can't I get unlimited energy into my capacitor? And the reason is, it's very similar to a solar cell. We get unlimited energy, but it trickles in at a very slow rate. So when you stop in space and you see your capacitor slowly refilling, that's the pegs filling your capacitor up at a very slow rate.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. One that I could got. Yes?
There was a chronicle about an asterocapsuleer going crazy and committing suicide while sitting cloaked. And part of the story was he was obsessed about a stone in the middle of his prayer room in his astero, and he got freaked out by it. And does this have anything to do with what you're talking about?
So the question is, there is a chronicle about a capsuleer who committed suicide in his capsule while he was cloaked because he had visions of a stone that was in his visions. I will say that the physicist, Max Singularity, may have been influenced by reading all the chronicles. So yeah, he saw the Star Stone, and he saw Subspace, and it drove him mad with insanity. And luckily, the mental protections didn't come in time, and it just drove him crazy. He saw the face of God. Yes?
You work a ship, and it's supposed to come point A to point B.
Yes.
And if you have bookmark, there's no apparent gate to point 2.
Yes.
So would you be theoretically able to warp into a planet, inside of a planet?
So in this case, you would, now I'm going based upon my observations. So as an astronomer, okay, so the question was, I'm trying to take care of the streamers because I was a streamer. I was a stream viewer once, so I love you guys. So the question is, if you warp into a planet, if you warp inside a planet and then you materialize, would you be destroyed? What would happen? Okay, so luckily, when you warp into a planet, if some of you have done this, you actually are still inside that planet. I've actually traveled through a few planets in there. So you still are in kind of this subspace envelope in there. And in other cases, if you warp into a sun, you are catapulted out like you would not believe. Who has done that? And so that's a subspace, you're out of here. Yeah, that's as best as I can see it from advanced physics.
And theoretically, the ship that you would warp into the planet would add to its mass.
Right.
Materialize inside it.
Yeah, as long as you're still within that warp envelope, within that peg envelope, you're safe as far as game mechanics are concerned. But there could be in lore, maybe somebody writes a chronicle where a ship comes in and the peg fails and you become part of the rock of that planet. So yeah, it'd be plausible. But again, that's just theoretical. That's not an official message from CCP. Yes?
So you said those are not thrusters, but energy vents, right?
Yes.
But if you vent energy from your position, wouldn't that generate some thrust? And even if not, why is then an afterburner called an afterburner if you are not using it for using that energy vent as a propulsion thruster?
In the Frigates of EVE, Max goes into a little more detail about the afterburners as well. So the micro warp drive is nothing but basically micro jumps that are going. But an afterburner is actually a dump of fuel into those plasmic vents, and it does give you a thrust. So they do become thrusters with afterburners. So that part is valid. And they also dump fuel into what's not shown on my diagram that's in the book is the rotational thrusters that are also there. So it does provide some thrust through that fuel. But the mass limitations of the Subspace 4 and the peg all of a sudden stops you from going faster, even though you're using an afterburner. And so that's the reason, yeah.
How do you explain dead space, basically?
I don't. I never liked Dead Space. Dead Space. You know, I guess if I have to make something up on the spot. I guess dead space would be an area of space where the peg physics are disturbed. You know, because that's how scramblers work, right? Scramblers scramble the whole system, so your warp drives can't work. Webbing, now you can see how webbing works. Webbing can, disrupt the floor on the grid, and that slows your ship down. So it increases that peg size, and it slows you down. So I guess dead space would also be something, along those lines that disrupts your warp calculations. Did that work? Yes.
What are you going to do when Torphy asks you to cut open a peg and explain that?
You're not going to do that, Torphy. The question was, what are you going to do when Torphy asks you to cut open a peg and explain that? It is such a simple structure. The structure is so simple, it's just, it eluded us for a millennia that it was so easy that it was right in front of our nose. Next. Yes, way up in the popcorn section.
Why do we need to align to a gravity well?
Why do we need to align to the gravity well? And the reason for that is you were traveling such huge distances, is one part. The other part is there is a chronicle about how the capacitor, the warp capacitor and the warp field generator needs to have a point that you can warp to. Because you can't warp to everything that you see in space. There's actually a gravity well that it picks up. So some objects that are in gravity wells, the capacitor can see it, the warp drive can see it. So you have to be absolutely aligned, because when you're traveling, like from Earth all the way out to Pluto, those multiple AUs, if you are off by a few degrees, you're off millions of miles when you're way out there, because it's exponential as it continues out. So you're way off. So you have to be in alignment. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't put in a slide because I thought I would take a lot longer based on my last presentations. So when you see a ship fly, this is my apocalypse. So when you see a ship fly, it doesn't behave normally because, again, it's not using thrusters. When you go into warp, have you ever seen your ship do this? Right?
I call it surfing.
You've seen ships do that. Again, it's because the pegs are creating that warp field. And it's actually the fields that are moving your ships through that subspace. So when you see that ship move like that, you can go, oh my God, thank you, Max. My immersion has just gotten deeper. Scholar. Next. So micro jump drives are exactly that. They're simply open. So again, if you use the three-dimensional mental picture, it doesn't work. But if you use the fourth-dimensional mental image, that you're just basically using these jump drives, that's how you're increasing your speed. You're just increasing the speed through almost a strobe-like effect of micro jumps. Oh, same thing. Yeah, exact same thing. So all of a sudden, you like on a Paladin, right? You fire off a micro jump drive and you go 100 kilometers. Same thing. It's just a micro. It's basically like a micro warp tunnel, but we call it a jump. That beer hit the wrong spot. Yes.
How do you explain warp speed differences between an empty
subspace if there's no mass?
So that's the problem with the ships. So like, what do I do with it? So it's a ratio, which I have not defined on purpose. It is a ratio between the two different ship sizes. And so the smaller ships are able to move much faster because if you see the size of their pegs and the deformation of the floor. So if you have a Titan, it's going to be a much larger peg signature than the Abaddon has. That's how I explain it.
How do hyperspatial rings work?
Say again?
Hyperspatial rings that increase your warp speed.
Haven't thought about that. Oh, so Selena said it reduces the size of your peg. I hate when they reduce the size of my peg. Nice peg, big boy. Yes?
How do you explain the fact that webs can catapult you into warp more rapidly while you're trying to align?
Wow, I didn't think about all of this, did I? Because I do that a lot, save my bacon a lot of time. So, yeah.
If the web is increasing the size of your peg, everything will make it more difficult to
There will be a wiki article about this soon. There you go. I give that one some thought. Actually, that's not a bad idea. If you want to send me ideas and questions for me to think about, send them to maxsingularity@gmail.com. There goes that email address. Yeah, you never would have guessed it, would you? Ever. So.
Wouldn't the huge energy transfer between hyperspace and normal space actually provide us with some rather visible effects, like the energy has to go somewhere?
So the question is the attraction between the normal space and the hyperspace, wouldn't we actually see something like that? So art department, are you in the room? You now have a model to go by. So, and this is a thing. When I talked about this model to CCP like 4 years ago, and then when they came off like 3 years ago and 2 years ago, I talked to this model with Torfi, and I would tell them about it, and they were like, "Oh my God, this makes sense." And it's like to be honest, they did not develop the game with this model in mind, and they developed the game to be a playable game. You know, so it has its stuff. So the physics model came later. But now that there's a physics model, there's two things happening already that I'm really excited about. It's going to affect the art department and how we see ships fly. And that's really amazing. That's a shout out to CCP that they've actually asked players to help them write their book and to help them write their engine. And that's really awesome. And the second part is, you guys are already making theories about how this works that I haven't even thought. I've heard conversations, I can hear you. I've heard conversations in the audience about how this would work based upon this physics. And so yeah, this is really cool. Yes?
Jump drive generators
Yes.
with groups of people jumping? Jump field generators. And even better, the hand of God to do that.
Version 2. Oh, wait, yeah, go ahead.
So if I use a sino, so jump to a sino, do I basically use the effect of the warp gates?
Yeah, so if you jump to a sino, it basically is giving you like this target field that you're doing. But you're using either a jump drive or you're using a Titan drive to create that like subspace tunnel that you would, which way, am I forward or backwards? Yeah, you would it does this function for you. So it's very similar to a Stargate, but again, you know the range is limited more on this. And so, but it's pretty much the same thing, except instead of having a second Stargate, you have a sino on the far end. But that would be another graphic that, hey, Corin, that'd be a good graphic.
So do just one create a tunnel, or does the sino help?
The sino helps, and that's the signal. and then it would go all the way through to that sino. So yeah, it wouldn't generate the sino from that because it's too small. But it would give you this bright target. And why is it shining so bright? Because of the signature of subspace energy. Right? Wait a minute, you've been asked, yes?
How do we get to the place to deploy new stargates? If you want to set a new stargate into a system and you can't do a sino there because the distance are too far for.
So like player-controlled stargates when we go to new space? Stand by a second. Soon. +1 for trying. Yes.
If you're needing gravity wells to warp to,
Yes.
how can we warp to a bookmark?
Because it's a signal. So it sits there and it pounds in space, and it's a thumper. What are you laughing about?
Space worms. That's why you can't email bookmarks even though you can fly in space.
Yeah, and you know, I actually did the research on this. EVE is 23,000 years in the future. And we just talked about the thumper with Dune. Dune is 12,000 years in the future. EVE is double that distance out. Wow. Yeah, the smiles as well. Yeah.
When you have Synos, normal Syno, what about the cloaked Syno?
Yeah, I didn't think about that one either. That's a good one, though. Yeah. Well, actually, no. That does make sense because it's right within the subspace realm of cloak. So it's a shallow depth. So it's no different than the sino. It's a shallow sino.
But you still didn't explain why I can't scan it out when I'm in the cloak space or in the warp space.
I think I answered that last time, right?
Yeah, you said reasons. Yeah, you won. It's okay, you won. Of course
Least-
there are reasons.
At least he was paying attention.
Constant use of X, are we constantly and excessively introducing energy into normal space? And what are these like causing long-term effects, maybe even making the universe collapse?
As a physicist, I had to violate all the rules of thermal energies and thermodynamics. But maybe not. Maybe not. Because where is all this energy going from the black holes? Where is all this energy going from dark energy and dark matter?
What happened in the solar system?
And there are some races who've been dicking with our universe too. So there are some places that things are not so healthy in EVE. Yes, yeah.
Is there any theory crafting on how this might apply to the EVE gate?
No, EVE gate. Is there any theory crafting on how it was to the EVE gate? The only thing I'm making up on the spot thinking about these physics is that it was such a huge, immense power. Because if you think about it, if there is an Earth, their technology is 20,000 years ahead, or 12,000 years at least, ahead of New Eden. If we ran into an Earth ship today, they'd be more powerful than even a Jovian ship. Because their technology, we would assume, continues to evolve, while New Eden had a reset button pressed on them. So the only thing I can think of is they had sufficiently advanced technology to create the EVE gate that was so deep through that realm of subspace that it was able not just to span the stars, but span entire galaxies. Yes, yeah. And matter of fact, and I thought about this too. How would even us in New Eden understand and find our way back to Earth? It would be almost impossible because in order to calculate, wow, there's a lot of slides I did. In order to calculate that, you would have to go back and try to get your bearings on all these other galaxies. And we barely even have maps to this very day of all these galaxies, let alone, this is what the galaxies look like from right here. Where the hell am I now? And that would be one of our problems in New Eden, is that we can't find the way back because we don't know how far the distance are and we don't have the relative known galaxies. Now, there could be quasars and there could be pulsars that maybe we can lock onto and do that, but it would be very challenging.
There is a plaque.
Yes.
There is an aluminum plaque that came with source that might tell you something about it.
Okay, did you hear that? There is an aluminum plaque that comes with the expanded edition, the source. Oh, source? Mm-hmm. Source book?
EVE source.
Oh, EVE source in the extended edition that may have some answers to that. I didn't know that. Yes, I do. I got to go home and now look at it. Yes.
Were you doing fleet jumps or fleet warps?
Take this warp, take this warp.
All the ships, the warp speed are changed to the slowest speed.
Yes.
Even if you do it the same way or same time or separate, how is that possible to change?
So everybody aligns within that same grid area. Everybody's aligned at that speed. And now you throw out that power. It's a combined pulse. And it opens up one window, one tunnel. And it can only hold back all of the ships, even the slowest one. It can only travel as fast as the slowest ship.
But even if there's one single ship that's trapped behind that didn't align,
Yeah.
still get the warp, and you would still warp at the same speed right off to the other one.
Ha ha. I'm trying to see more. Yes, this way.
So if you need to align to a specific signature to warp, how do the micro warp drives and micro jump drives? So do they align to? What signature do they lock onto for their?
Yeah, so for the drive to work, there's a chronicle about that. And they need like this gravity well. So even if you're at afterburner or a micro warp drive, once you are aligned, you still need that 3/4 power to go into the field. How? I got a quiz question for you. There is a velocity that you exit a hyperspace warp field. Do you know what it is? Yeah. This is an advanced question. So it requires 3/4 power to go in, and you're traveling in warp. And when you come out through the floor, what is that value? 100 ms. 100 ms, and then it slows down. So research that one on the web. Some of my colleagues have done some advanced calculations on that. There are some exceptions to the warp envelope in the mathematics of EVE, but when you come out, you're doing 100 right at that point. And in doing this project, I learned so much about EVE that I would raise my head. So I think I need a beer, and I thank you very much.